I may regret saying this, but Arsenal are in a serious slump in form in 2024-25, and the fact that Mikel Arteta has bagged only one prestigious trophy in 5 years as a manager, and yet no one is talking about him leaving, it really surprises me. And having spent top dollar literally every summer since his arrival, isn't it time for Arteta to up his game? Let's follow all the reasons behind Arsenal's decline this season. And to back up the facts with evidence, let's focus on Arsenal's results against the big teams. Realistically, in the last 2 seasons before 2024-25, the Gunners built a reputation as a team capable of competing as equal against the best clubs in Europe. We all remember the victories over Man City with the winning goal from Martinelli, the 3-1 win over Liverpool last season at the Emirates, or even the 5-0 thrashing against Chelsea in April 2024. All of these results, along with the other notable examples, of course, have helped Arsenal keep their title hopes alive, but they've also given them a reputation as a feared club, a club that everyone will have problems playing against. In 2024-25, however, that has changed drastically, especially in the last few weeks, as Arsenal have been knocked out of the FA Cup at the 3rd round by Manchester United and are practically out of the EFL Cup as well, having lost 2-0 to Newcastle. Yes, they have to pull off a miracle at St James's Park in 2 weeks' time, but will they do it? I mean, they've struggled there recently, losing their last 2 games in the North and with 2 goals to spare. I really can't see them turning it around, especially with all the sporting and club structure problems we'll be talking about in a minute. So, apart from the 4 wins over struggling PSG in the Champions League, as well as against Man United and the double against Spurs in the league, yes, those are the only 4 relatively prestigious wins Arsenal have managed this season. The Gunners have lost twice to Newcastle and once to Inter and Man United in the FA Cup. They have also drawn with Chelsea, Liverpool and Man City in the league, with the latter undoubtedly their best game of the season. Let's say the draws are understandable, as all 3 opponents put in strong performances. But when it comes to the cup ties against Newcastle and Man United, this is where the first red flag started showing up. The most shocking stat of those 2 failures was that Arsenal accumulated the exact same expected goals total, 3.22, but scored just once, underperforming by 5.4 goals. On top of that, Arsenal registered 49 shots in total, missing 10 great chances, but scored only once in 230 minutes of play. And let's not forget that they played the Red Devils with a man down for over 60 minutes and still lost on penalties. Interestingly, that trend continued against Tottenham at the Emirates. Arsenal were trailing, but then, with 2 late first-half goals, managed to get a very tough-fought win over local rivals. Even with the win, however, it's a fact that Arsenal were once again missing chance after chance, 4 in total to be more precise. That is simply unacceptable for a team with Arsenal's ambitions. No natural goal scorer, not enough depth, and no mentality. And those 3 key words lead us to the first major problem, the injury crisis. Yes, that's the most obvious one, you already know that, but it's still surprising to see players get injured literally every week. At the start of the season, it was the defence that struggled a lot, as every important defender, apart from Saliba and Timber, has suffered or is currently suffering an injury. Gabriel Magalhaes, Ben White, Ricardo Calafiori and Takahiro Tomiyasu. And with at least 3 of the starting 4 available in defence now, it was time for a devastating injury crisis in attack. Bukayo Saka is out until March with a hamstring injury, Ethan Nwaneri won't play for at least a few more games, while Gabriel Jesus is likely to be out until the end of the season with a possible ACL injury. Speaking specifically of injuries, I can agree with Arteta that it's impossible to play your best game without some of your best players, especially when you have a game every 3 days. But hey, every big team in Europe has to deal with this situation, so the problem is probably internal. And yet, when other top clubs have faced injury crises, most of them have managed to come out of it almost undamaged. One of the stories of the season so far in this regard is Real Madrid. Yes, they may not be the perfect example, especially after their 5-2 thrashing in El Clasico, but their handling of injuries is on a whole other level. Earlier in the season, against Osasuna in November, Los Blancos lost 3 key players in the same game. Rodrigo and Vasquez went off injured, while Eder Militao suffered a torn ACL for the 2nd season in a row and will miss the whole 2024-25. Oh, and a few weeks earlier, they lost another key player, Dani Carvajal, who's also out with an ACL. Nevertheless, Madrid won 7 of their 8 league games since that nightmare against Osasuna and now sit comfortably second. You see, if a club has the methods and depth, they can easily deal with injuries. Another major problem I can't overlook is the management. In no way could I complain about the quality Arsenal brought, even picking the exact players Arteta asked for. 115 million euros for Declan Rice, 75 for Havertz, 60 for Ben White, and 52 for Gabriel Jesus. Those are the 4 most expensive transfers Arsenal have made during the Mikel Arteta era, 250 mil in total. And if you want to go even further, the total amount of money spent since the Spaniards' arrival is 782 million euros compared to 225 million received for players sold. That makes a loss of 557 million euros in the 5 years since Arteta took over. And you have only won a single trophy, the FA Cup, which, by the way, was won before the big players arrived. By the way, if you like this episode so far, hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on the Football Fanatic channel. And here is the big question. Who is the bigger villain here? Is it Arteta, who gets almost everything he wants and has spent more than his direct Premier League rivals Man City and Liverpool in the last 2 seasons and still failed to win the title? Or is it the management that continues to spend big on players the team simply doesn't need? Of course, investments like Rice, Odegaard, and why not even Jesus were much needed because they brought class to the squad. But nobody could ever convince me that 75 mil for Havertz was a fair investment. Yes, overall, he is a good footballer and scored some important goals, can play in 2 or 3 different positions, but at the moment, he simply brings nothing to the table. And when I say nothing, I mean it. Just look at his misses against Newcastle and Manchester United. He could easily be accused of being the biggest liability in those 2 games. Then, against Spurs, his poor form didn't go unnoticed as he was the worst Arsenal player on the pitch. Don't get me wrong, I like him as a player, I love his versatility. But to be honest, I don't really see his versatility right now. I mean, in at least 85% of his games for Arsenal, Havertz has played as a striker. So it's good that the Gunners have a player who can fill gaps like him, but 75 million is way too much for a footballer of his caliber. Instead, he should have been bought in for somewhere between 40 and 55, with the rest going to positions that need to be covered. I know what you're thinking, but let me leave that for later. Other players that Arsenal have somehow managed to overpay for are Ricardo Calafiori and Ben White. Let's talk about the former Brighton man first. Yes, I know he was talented, I know he entered the English tax, but I still think 60 million is a little more than what should have been paid for him. Yes, you can slam me in the comments saying things like he paid them back with his form, but in the current crisis, it might have been wiser to invest less and keep more for the essentials. And Calafiori, of course, the typical reactionary transfer Arsenal make when someone is being talked about. Yes, I know, good form in Italy, playing for Bologna, one of the pillars of their defence, finishing 4th in a very competitive Serie A season. Then the hype around Euros, the Maldini comparisons. I understand where the PR is coming from, but I just don't get how Arsenal agreed to spend 45 million on a defender with only 1 solid season in a top 5 league. So with all that being said, let's talk about the playing style. There's no clear indication as to why the Gunners have started to play with such a lack of creativity. Well, obviously, Saka's absence is evident, but I don't think it's after his injury. For at least a couple of months now, Arsenal have simply not been at the level we have seen them at in their best moments over the last 2 years. So the obvious suggestion is that they should buy, and they should buy someone big this winter. It won't be the level of Alexander Isak or Victor Gyökeres, of course, but why not someone like Wolverhampton's Matheus Cunha?
What's been your favourite rumour so far?
My favourite rumour in terms of making sense for a football club is Cunha to Arsenal.
What do you think? Would Cunha be a positive signing for Arsenal? And how much money would you invest in him if you had the power to do so? Let us know below. Also, if you enjoyed that one, you'll love our video on Alexander Isak. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, as always. And until the next time.